Can the Seattle Seahawks dethrone the 49ers for the NFC West in 2023? And I don't think enough people are having this conversation. I think a lot of people are penciling in the 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles for a rematch in the NFC Championship this year. But Seattle, they have the most talented young roster in the NFL going into this year. I mean, they went absolutely berserk in this past year's NFL draft. They got Devon Witherspoon, they got Zach Charbonnet, they also got Kenny McIntosh out of the University of Georgia. And going through Seattle's roster, I mean, they're stacked at nearly every single position. Receiver, you draft Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State. This guy shredded Utah in the freaking Rose Bowl. This man was a man amongst boys every time he suited up for the Buckeyes. And Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and a couple of other Ohio State wide receivers even said that he was better than what they were. And you put him on Seattle. He's going to be playing the slot, and you're going to have him playing alongside DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, with Geno Smith throwing him the football. This is one of the most explosive offenses going into this season. And Geno Smith, you know, they wrote him off, but he didn't write back. Well, he's going to be writing off a lot of doubters this year who believe that he may not be good enough to take Seattle to the Super Bowl. And when you look at Geno Smith, this was somebody who threw 30 touchdowns to only 11 interceptions. He was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL last season. And you think about San Francisco's quarterback situation right now. I mean, obviously it's not in a bad state. We already know that Kyle Shanahan has the ability to elevate the play of any quarterback that he puts underneath center. But Geno Smith is better than any quarterback that the 49ers are going to be trotting out there this season. So you already have to give the advantage in the quarterback department to Seattle. And then think about the running back position. Yeah, the 49ers have Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell, but the Seattle Seahawks have Kenneth Walker, who was the best rookie running back last year, over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and he has rookie Zach Charbonnet, who's also going to be splitting carries with him, who also is a pretty good back coming out of UCLA. He can catch the ball well. He also is a really tough physical runner. He reminds me a lot of what's his name for the Arizona Cardinals? James Conner. That's who Zach Charbonnet reminds me of. And this offensive line is going to be one of the best in the NFL this year. You got to remember that last year, Seattle started 2 rookie offensive tackles, and they performed at a really high level. You got Charles Cross, you got right tackle Abraham Lucas, and they have a center that they drafted in Alu Atemi out of Michigan. I expect him to be competing for that starting spot with Evan Brown. If he ends up winning that thing, I think he can end up being the best rookie center in the NFL this season. For their defense, I mean, Seattle is absolutely stacked at nearly every position on the defensive side of the football. You have pass rushers, Uchenna Nwosu, Darrell Taylor. Both of those guys had 9.5 sacks each. Boye Mafe could end up being another guy who could have a breakout season. He had a really good rookie season. Jordan Brooks had probably the best season of his career last year. You bring back B-Wags, which he never should have left the building in the first place. And this secondary should take some tremendous steps this upcoming season. You get my guy, Devin Witherspoon, out of Illinois. He was my number 1 ranked cornerback coming out of this past year's draft. Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, both of those guys had really impressive rookie seasons, especially Tariq Woolen. There are many Seahawks fans that will fight you and say that Tariq Woolen was better than Sauce Gardner. And I'm not going to disagree with any of you guys. I'm just going to say I like Sauce a little bit more than I like Tyreek. But I don't think Tariq Woolen is too far off. This guy is an incredible corner. You got Quandre Diggs, and maybe, potentially, we can see Jamal Adams suit up eventually and play for Seattle sometime this upcoming season. So for Seattle, this roster, not only is it talented, But they have a lot of depth at nearly every position. And that's something that you can't say about too many teams in the NFL. A lot of teams are pretty top heavy. You have your starters. You may have a quality backup or two, but that's about it. But for Seattle, it seems like these guys are just stacking talent on top of talent on top of talent. Like they got Devin Bush, who they signed in free agency, and he may not even start this year for them. San Francisco, their roster is really good, but at wide receiver, I think that the Seattle Seahawks are better with the addition of Jackson Smith-Njigba. You do have Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. We know what those guys bring to the table. Your offensive line is pretty good. You're going to have Brock Purdy potentially starting at quarterback or Trey Lance. It doesn't really matter who the 49ers put back there at QB. It seems like they get good quarterback play regardless. But I just think that Seattle, right now going into this year, has the upper hand on San Fran. And many 49ers fans may get a little bit offended with that, but there's no way you can look at Seattle's roster right now and think about what they did last season and not say they have a legitimate chance of being able to take away this division. I mean, the Rams, they don't really look all that great. Arizona isn't going to be good this year. So this division mainly is going to come down to Seattle and San Fran. And if you were to ask me to make a prediction right now, today, who I think is winning the West, I think it's going to be Seattle. Seattle has a talented team that last year was really young. They had a lot of rookies starting. There were a lot of inexperienced guys who were in there. And they had some really good moments, but they also had a stretch late in the season where they kind of went cold, but they still found a way to sneak into the postseason. But this team this year, you're going to have those rookies last year who now are going to be going into their second year. You're going to have way more experience. You're going to have way more talent. Seattle probably should be getting mentioned in that Super Bowl conversation. And when you think about teams who have the opportunity to make it out of the NFC, Seattle isn't really a popular team that many people mention. Most of the teams that people think about are either the Eagles or the 49ers, but Seattle, their roster is just as good. And if you're a San Francisco 49ers fan, you're probably saying, well, JT, what about our defense? I mean, we got defensive coordinator Steve Wilks, one of the best defensive minds in the game. Yeah, your defense still is going to be amongst the best despite losing D'Amico Ryans. You add Javon Hargrave in free agency to an already stout defensive line with Bosa, Arik Armstead. You're going to have Fred Warner at linebacker. Your secondary still is going to be really fantastic. Like, San Francisco's defense is still going to be elite. It's still going to be really good. And you think about how Seattle's defense performed at times, it was pretty inconsistent. But I think this year, Seattle is going to take a major step in improvement when it comes to their defense. I expect their run defense to be really good. Their pass rush should be amongst the best in the NFL. They have plenty of guys who can get after the passer. They also have guys on the bench who are going to be able to come in and be good situational pass rushers for the Seahawks. I think that for the 49ers, yes, you do have one of the best rosters in the NFL, but I think Seattle's roster at this moment is more talented because they have more depth at every single position. I mean, if we were to go position by position right now, Seattle would be better than the San Francisco 49ers at a handful of them. Like quarterback, Seattle. Running back, San Francisco. Offensive line, I'm going with Seattle. Wide receiver, Seattle. Tight end, okay, you can go with the 49ers, even though I think Noah Fan and Will Disley are pretty good. But when you have George Kittle, one of the best tight ends in the NFL, you have to go ahead and go with the 49ers. On defense, the defensive line, I'm going to give it to San Fran. Linebacker, the 49ers have it. Cornerback, the secondary, I'm going to give it to Seattle. I think Kobe Bryant's going to have a huge year going into his second season. You're going to have Tariq Woolen, who already has established himself as one of the best up-and-coming cornerbacks in the league. You're going to have Quandre Diggs and Jamar Adams when he gets healthy. Like, the Seattle Seahawks, have a good enough roster not only to be able to dethrone the 49ers and take the NFC West crown this year, but they also need to get a little bit more recognition when it comes to them being in the Super Bowl conversation. Don't be surprised if you see a Philadelphia Eagles versus Seattle Seahawks NFC Conference Championship this year. This Seahawks team deserves a little bit more recognition and a little bit more praise. Like, some of you guys think like Seattle's just going to be a team that makes it to the playoff. They may win a playoff game and then lose in the divisional round, but this team is good enough to win the Super Bowl. This is a really stacked team. They already have talent at every single position amongst their starters, but not just that, they have tons of depth. If one guy gets injured, it doesn't matter because they're going to have another guy who can step in and perform at a high level also. The Seattle Seahawks most definitely have a really strong chance to dethrone the 49ers for the NFC West in 2023. Some of you guys may disagree with that, but I'm going to pick the Seattle Seahawks to win the West this upcoming season.